The UK's new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has promised to bring change. But what does this mean for the future of Britain?
Hungary's Viktor Orban was in Moscow for talks with Putin in a rare visit to Russia by a European leader since it invaded Ukraine more than 2 years ago.
Days after assuming the European Council presidency, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban sparks anger in Brussels for a surprise trip to Moscow.
Russia has been hit by an overnight Ukrainian drone strike in the southern region of Krasnodar.
On the morning of the Labour Party's landslide UK general election win, party leader and new Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said change begins now. But what does this mean? And what is the expected timeline for a government that's waited 14 years to set the political agenda? After the 61-year-old former barrister and Director of Public Prosecutions was formally appointed Prime Minister by King Charles III, Starmer said, "My government will serve you." He told reporters outside 10 Downing Street his ambitions for the next 5 years would focus on putting the country first, party second.
Changing a country is not like flicking a switch. The world is now a more volatile place. This will take a while. But have no doubt that the work of change begins immediately.
The Labour Manifesto, a document outlining the party's political priorities, lists 5 goals for the next half-decade. It includes kick-starting economic growth, reducing violent crime, and improving and investing in the ailing National Health Service. Despite the optimism, Starmer and his party face an uphill battle, both at home and abroad, and will need to mitigate a cost of living crisis, global conflicts, and climate change.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban was in Moscow for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in a rare visit to Russia by a European leader since it invaded Ukraine more than 2 years ago. Orban's visit comes only days after a similar unannounced visit to Ukraine, where he met with Ukrainian President Zelensky and proposed that Kyiv consider an immediate ceasefire with Russia. His trip to Moscow has drawn criticism from other EU leaders. President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen said unity was the only way to peace in Ukraine. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk questioned who Orban was serving.
Az ukrán államfőtől, hogy hogyan tovább a keddi találkozó után, arról azokra a helyekre, ahol olyan háborús veszély van, vagy háború, aminek Európára és Magyarországra nézve is van negatív következménye, és tényeket tisztázok. Tehát kérdéseket teszek föl. Például tettem föl Zelenszky elnök úrnak is 3-4 fontos kérdést, hogy mit gondol ezekről, hogy meg lehessen érteni az ő szándékait, hogy hol van az a vörös vonal, a határvonal, ameddig ő a béke érdekében el tud menni.
Orban has routinely blocked, delayed or watered down EU efforts to assist Ukraine and impose sanctions on Moscow. His visit to Russia comes just days into Hungary's presidency of the Council of the European Union, with European Council President Charles Michel saying the rotating presidency had no mandate to engage with Russia on behalf of the bloc.
Make Europe great again, borrowing a phrase from Donald Trump, is the slogan of Hungary's 6-month rotating presidency of the European Council. And just days into Hungary's presidency, and Prime Minister Viktor Orban has drawn the ire of the EU after reports emerged he's taking an unscheduled visit to Putin in Russia. President of the European Council, Charles Michel, reminded Orban he has no right to represent the EU in Moscow, tweeting, "The EU rotating presidency has no mandate to engage with Russia on behalf of the EU. No discussions about Ukraine can take place without Ukraine." Meanwhile, the government says its priorities for the EU as part of the presidency include a strong line on migration, enlargement, and it also has a strong role to play to ensure the smooth transition to a new College of Commissioners after the European Parliament elections. It also says defence is a priority, but Hungary is still blocking €6.6 billion of military support for Ukraine.
The Hungarian government took the decision that we provide wide-ranging support for Ukraine, including humanitarian one, but we do not provide direct or indirectly military support to Ukraine.
The Hungarian government says it promises to be an honest broker and work hard on the transition to the new College of Commissioners, despite the fact that Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister, voted against Ursula von der Leyen for a second term as President of the European Commission. However, there is concern among some member states that the constant blocking by Hungary on issues regarding Ukraine, whether it's military, finance or the areas of enlargement, will still cause consternation. Shona Murray, Euronews, Budapest.
Ukraine has struck the southern Russian region of Krasnodar in an overnight drone attack which killed at least one person, according to local authorities. More drone strikes in the Republic of Adygea and the central Tambov region are also reported to have set several oil depots on fire. While Kyiv has not yet claimed responsibility for the attacks, Ukraine has previously struck Russian energy sites and targeted its infrastructure. It follows footage released by the Russian Ministry of Defense of what it says shows units using land drones and tanks to attack Ukrainian positions near Donetsk. The statement also said operators of FPV drones have been continually surveying the position of the armed forces of Ukraine on the right bank of the Dnieper River. It comes as Ukraine's army has been forced to retreat from a neighborhood in the outskirts of Chaziv Yar, a strategically important city in the eastern Donetsk region.
Iranians are voting today in a runoff election to replace the late President Ibrahim Raisi, killed in a helicopter crash last month. After years of economic struggle, mass protests and tensions, public apathy has become pervasive in the Islamic Republic. Voters face a choice between the hardline former nuclear negotiator Said Jalili and Mesut Pezeshkian, a heart surgeon and a longtime parliament member who has allied himself with moderates and reformists within Iran's Shiite theocracy. The initial round of voting on June 28 saw no candidate get over 50% of the vote, forcing the runoff. This was also the lowest turnout ever for an Iranian election. There have been calls for a boycott, including from imprisoned Nobel Peace Prize laureate Narji Mohammadi. Iran's 85-year-old Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei has the final say on all matters of state. Presidents can bend the country's policies toward confrontation or negotiation with the West.
Labour unions have staged a protest in Athens against new six-day workweek legislation. The new law applies to the public sector, public utilities, banks and some private businesses that operate 24 hours a day. The government says the initiative will boost productivity and address problems of unpaid overtime and undeclared work. But unions argue that it ends the traditional 5-day working week and rolls back on hard-won rights.
Die Niederlande haben eines der besten Pflegesysteme der Welt, doch das kostet. Die Niederlande geben mehr Geld für Pflege aus als andere Industriestaaten. Trotzdem fehlen Zehntausende Pflegekräfte. Die Gesellschaft steht vor riesigen Herausforderungen, denn die Zahl der Senioren wächst rasant.
Hey there, hoe is het met haar? Ja? Ja.
We manage everything ourselves, so we do the client schedules. We decide how much time we spend with the clients, and it's not only the caring part, but also a little bit of talking. And we have the time to do that because there's no overhead, and that saves a lot of money.
We hebben in Nederland veel meer woonvormen nodig, veel meer variatie tussen thuis en het verpleeghuis in. Je kunt woningen splitsen, woningen delen, generaties met elkaar verbinden en veel meer collectieve woonvormen ontwikkelen.
In de vorige huis had ik minder contacten dan hier. Ik doe hier ook veel meer. Ik ben hier vrijwilligster. En ik doe veel meer voor de mensen dan in mijn vorige huis.
Oh my God! You are very terrible, Mama. Heb jij gewonnen? Ja. Heb je ook
As France heads to the polls this Sunday in a tense final round of legislative elections, the political debate has been marked by the resurgence of anti-Semitism. The French Jewish community is skeptical about the new far right, according to this prospective Jewish lawmaker.
Ils ont voulu se présenter comme un parti respectable, ils ont voulu se présenter comme un bouclier et comme une protection contre l'antisémitisme et pour les Juifs de France, mais nous ne sommes pas dupes. Le Rassemblement national restera le Front national de Jean-Marie Le Pen et je n'oublie pas leur idéologie raciste, xénophobe.
Last week, Shannon Seban's heated exchange with a woman in Paris before Sunday's first round of voting saw her accused of many things, including being a Zionist. If the Jewish community's fears pertained only about the far right, they are now concerned by the anti-Israel slogans of the left.
La seule victoire qui a été remportée contre l'antisémitisme, c'est le fait que les partis qui étaient antisémites ne le sont plus. Par malheur, les partis qui normalement ne devaient pas être antisémites sont devenus antisémites. L'extrême gauche est devenue l'extrême droite en ce qui concerne les Juifs.
Some of the aggression against Jews in Europe have been happening from the start of the Gaza conflict, taking advantage of critics against Israeli government policies in Gaza, but there is a growing pro-Israeli narrative from some parties.
Il y a ce jeu tout à fait particulier du Rassemblement national qui, au nom de l'anti-islamiste, devint prosémite et essaie de rassurer et peut-être rassurera une partie, on va dire, conservatrice et réactionnaire de la communauté israélite en France.
In Italy, Giorgia Meloni's ruling far-right has adopted a pro-Israeli narrative too.
Ma se voi decidete di rimanere su quella strada o di avere ambiguità su quella strada, sappiate che state percorrendo una strada alternativa alla nostra. Ecco, una affermazione così chiara da parte del Rassemblement io non l'ho ancora fino a qui ascoltata.
Analysts say the structural difference between the Italian and the French far-right is that the first has been ruling the country for 2 years and had to deal with world politics and not just the moods of the domestic electorate.